Hi, in this video I will introduce some of basic statistical methods where we will see in how many different ways can samples be selected. But before that, it's very important to understand the concept of population and sample. So let's have a look. Now let's suppose that this person here, he is interested to gather some information from a group of people. It means that required information is related to each and every individual in the group. Or in other words, he is interested in this complete group of people from where the information of interest can be obtained. So in other words, this whole group of individuals from where we can get some information of interest is termed as population. Now let's suppose that due to some reason he is unable to collect information from each and every individual in the population. So what does he do? He selects some of the individual from this larger group, which is a subgroup from this bigger group. Now this subgroup or the subset from this complete group of individual is termed as sample. So any information required will now be collected from this subset of the population and not the population itself. Now let's consider an example of a lecture theatre where at the end of the lecturer is interested to record some responses against this question of interest, which is the number of hours spent on online gaming. However, there are only few minutes to the end time and he needs to select a sample of students to record their responses. So let's see how many ways it can be done. Let's have a look at the first method of selecting the sample of students. So let's suppose that he randomly selects some students, which means that each student has the same chance of being selected and there is no hard and fast rule to select any student. So you can see here that he may select the first student at random and then second and then third, and it goes on till all the number of students in the sample are selected, which in this case, let's say the number is 10. That is, the 10 students are going to be selected in the sample. So this method of sampling where the students can be randomly selected without any rule or method is termed as random sampling. Now look at another sampling method where the lecturer does not pick the students at random, but he chooses a number k. So let's say that number is 5. Now in this case, he selects every fifth student sitting in the rows after selecting the first student at random, which means that let's say he selects this student here at random. And now from this student, every fifth student sitting in the rows from the right will be selected. And the next fifth, as you can see, and the next selected will be the next fifth from this student. So you can see it keeps on selecting every fifth student sitting in the rows. So it keeps on selecting until the last fifth student will be selected. So this is the last student, as you can see. So in this case, the total number of students selected are 8. So it depends that how many students are there in total, that is the total population. And if you select a number, then every kth member of the population will be selected. So this method is termed as systematic sampling. Let's consider another scenario where lecturer assumes or know from his previous knowledge or research that boys tend to spend more time on online gaming than the girls. Therefore, he do simple changes before he start doing sampling. And what does he do? He divides the total number of students into two groups, one of boys and one of girls. So as you can see, these two groups are different from each other based on the gender. And then as a next step, he selects randomly some number of boys and then selects randomly some number of girls. So he decides to randomly select 6 boys and he will select them at random. So after dividing the total population into two groups, he selects some of the members from one group and then he selects 4 girls from the group of girls. And you can see that in this way he selects 10 samples or 10 number of students from two groups of students. This kind of sampling or this type of sampling method where the population is divided into two groups and then the number of samples from each group are randomly selected is known as stratified sampling. Let's move to final method of sampling. And let's suppose that the lecturer now randomly select two groups of students. And you will be wondering that the population was divided into two groups before. But after I show you how these two groups are selected, you can see the difference between two. So let's suppose that he selects this group of students here, and then he selects another group of students on this side. So as you can see that now each group contains both boys and girls, and the two groups are not divided based on a common characteristics. So in a way, the total population is not divided into two groups, but any two groups are randomly selected from the population. Now these groups are known as clusters. So you can see that two clusters of students are randomly selected, and now there will be no random selection from these two clusters. Instead, the total number of students in these two clusters will be selected in the sample. So the 4 students in the first cluster here and the 5 students selected in the second cluster here. I beg your pardon, these are 5 students here. So 5 students in the first cluster and 5 students in the second cluster, they will be selected in the sample. And now this randomly selected 2 cluster contains the total number of the students that are to be in the sample. And this sampling method is known as cluster sampling. So summarizing today's video, we looked at the concept of population and sample, and then we discussed or introduced some of the basic statistical methods, which are random sampling, systematic sampling, stratified sampling, and finally, cluster sampling. I hope you liked the video. Thank you very much.